Maybe I don't got it.
There we go. All right. I thought I could operate the microphone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Full house today. Excellent. Welcome to the Dean's Diversity Series. Our special guest today is Dr. Elizabeth Travis. In a change of pace, I had asked Drs. Mallet and Basic to host Dr. Travis. Unfortunately, Dr. Mallet is a victim of the snow. She is stuck in New York. She sends her regards. She is obsessing trying to catch a thrice delayed plane. So she sends her regards and her apologies for not being here. I think I can substitute for her just this once. Dr. Travis is currently an Associate Vice President for Women's Faculty Programs at MD Anderson. You will learn and you will see that she's a strong advocate for women faculty. One of the identified gaps on the campus is the number of senior women that we have on faculty, senior professors. Very candidly, we only have 5. 3 of those are in the Department of OB-GYN. And so we want to make sure that we begin to develop, and I have tasked Drs. Ho and Dr. Kapasik in Faculty Affairs to begin to work very closely with our group on women in medicine and science to develop a mentoring program. And as we begin to roll that out, I know staff and faculty affairs have given quite a bit of attention to the details on that. But having said that, I think we initiate the discussion, as we do with all of the Dean's Diversity Series, on diversity topics, with inviting special guest speakers at least on a monthly basis. Dr. Travis has been with us before. She graced us with her presence at the Cultural Competence Conference last year to rave reviews, gave us some very effective advice, and we've asked her to come once again to the Dean's Diversity Series. It's our pleasure to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Travis.
They've got me wired on both sides.
They've got you wired.
Oh boy, they do. I'm wired. Good afternoon. It is afternoon. So thank you very much, Dr. De La Rosa, for that very wonderful and kind introduction. It is a pleasure. I was here last year when they called me again. I said, of course, I'd love to come. I find this campus in El Paso a very exciting place to be. I think that you're building an intellectual powerhouse here with Texas Tech and the other school that's here as well. But I think that's wonderful because that's the kind of thing that builds communities, brings in jobs, brings in people who are professionals, and has plenty of job opportunities for people. So I think it's really an exciting place to be. So I was delighted to be invited back for this Dean seminar. So I'm talking today about recruiting and retaining women leaders in medicine and science. And as the Dean just pointed out, he said you have 5 women professors. And if you don't get to professorial level, you're not going to get to a leadership level. So with 5, and I don't know what percentage that is, because percentage is actually more important than the actual number. If it's, if you don't have many professors and that represents 30%, that's pretty good. But if you have more professors and it represents less than, say, 20 or whatever percent, not so good. So that is really the critical issue. So I'm going to I'm going to break the talk into 3 parts. And part of it is, what we've been doing, what are the data. I always start with data. Don't everybody glaze over. There's not a lot of it, but to set the stage. Now I'm going to talk about what the institutions have been doing that are keeping women out of leadership positions, what women are doing as well, that are in some ways obstructing. We are our own worst enemies. And then finally, I'm going to talk about something that I think is a way of overcoming all of this, and it involves everybody. So having said that, let's talk about data. So here are the data. The data say that, we have a lot of, all right off the bat. You got a preview of coming attractions. There are a lot of women in medicine and science. Back one more. 50% women graduating from medical school and from life sciences, biology degrees. We're not doing as well as engineering and math, the STEM fields, if you will, but in medicine and science, we're doing really well. So this is great. Now, and this is, you could say, okay, but this hasn't been going on for a long time. This has been happening for at least a decade. These numbers have been there. So we should be seeing women in senior positions. And are we? Well, not so much. So this is for medicine and science, and you see math and engineering. The green are the men. The women are in the red. And you can see that women lag behind men as professors, as you just heard earlier. So you are not unique. It's an issue of where are you on a scale, of not very good scale. But women are 25% at the most, 25% of professors are women. So we should be doing a lot better than that. We're also lagging as leaders. I like this cartoon because this cartoon is, you can see that 16% of the deans, this is the most current data out of 141 medical schools. We had to take out 4 of those to get the denominator because we weren't sure who the dean, they were ad interims and we didn't put them in. So out of 137 medical schools, 16% of them are women. That's better than it used to be. It was 13%, but the numbers are still really small. And so we aren't doing so well in leadership positions. But where we seem to have a lot of women are senior associate dean, and assistant dean. And it's interesting, even there, you can see that at the lowest levels, you have a lot of assistant deans. At the senior associate dean and vice dean, the percentage is, again, even less. So even in these dean positions, we still have a problem with getting women into senior positions. The other thing we know about these positions is that they don't lead to being the dean. Not many of the women or men in these categories move into dean positions. But yet, women leaders make a difference. There are plenty of data that show this. First of all, just from the standpoint, you want to recruit people, you want to recruit women, you better have women. And women, when women see women as leaders, they feel there's an opportunity for them. Women leaders also make a difference. They're role models, interpersonal skills. Women bring a different perspective to solving problems than men. Not better, not worse, different. And it's all about bringing a diversity of ideas together to solve these really complex problems that are facing academic medicine, medicine in general. Just, how are we going to deliver care in a cost-effective, more cost-effective? How are we going to do more with less? How are you going to see more patients on the Affordable Care Act with less resources or even the same resources? So it's going to take a lot of different heads around these problems to come up with innovative solutions. We know that in the corporate world, that when women are on boards, the return on investment is always better when women are on corporate boards. When women are CEOs, return on investment is better. We're all interested in doing better financially. I say, get more women up there. They improve the bottom line. And interpersonal skills. As I said, we interact differently. There are differences, and that's fine. So what women bring to the table is we really do like to build teams. We do believe in asking people's opinions, listening. It's not that the men don't. We just do it a little more naturally, I think. But it's important to bring those kinds of skills to leadership positions so that that we can improve not only our bottom line, but recruiting women into your institution. So have we made any progress? You know, I've been actually working on this issue almost my whole career as a scientist. I've always been interested and involved with equity issues for women, always been involved with whatever was going on in our organization, with a women faculty organization or whatever we had. So have we made progress? Well, one place we've made progress is we're really good at looking at data. We've been doing a lot of research. We report out data all the time. So everybody's on top of the data. I'm a scientist by training. I ran a research lab for 30 plus years. And so to me, data is really critical. But I think data is important because if you don't have the data, you can't make your case. More importantly than that, you can't answer the question whether you're doing better, staying the same, or hopefully not doing worse. So you need data. You need robust data. You need to track it. You need to put those things in place. We're doing a pretty good job of this. Education and career development. We're all over this. Mentoring programs, AAMC, early, mid-career, minority program, aspiring leaders program, ELAM. ELAM has placed a number of women as deans. These are a lot of these women all came from the ELAM program. So we're doing well with education and career development. Increasing the visibility of women, nominating them for awards, having women invited as guest speakers, recognizing your own women in your organization in some way. So we're doing well with this too. The missing piece. What aren't we doing well? What aren't we doing well? Somebody say something. I believe in audience participation.
Leaders.
Yes.
Retaining women through the
Yes. Can we put that in a kind of a more, those are kind of like the specific aims. So what part of the hypothesis isn't working here? Cultural change. Have we changed the culture? I would suggest that we have not changed the culture as much as we could. So let's look at that. So everybody knows this, and in fact, I'm not so sure, everybody talks about the glass ceiling, and that earlier PowerPoint with deans and associate deans kind of looked like a glass ceiling or a glass floor, but that's not really helpful. I think the idea that there are many obstacles that it's like the dripping faucet. Eventually it wears off, it rots something out. It's the same thing here, that there are many obstacles that women face. Some of these obstacles that are up here, demands of family life, gender bias, resistance to women leaders, are deeply embedded in the culture. They're deeply embedded in women and how they approach having children, when they have children, etc. And then some of them are what women themselves do. We underinvest in social capital, and the leadership style is also something that's a cultural thing. Gender bias, unfortunately, alive and well. It is alive and well. What's wrong with this picture? There are no females. Actually, usually I have a picture, and we couldn't find one, and I can't figure out why, except to use my own institution as an example. I thought maybe they wouldn't be so happy about that because, quite frankly, we have no women in senior leadership positions. And I frequently take a picture of everybody on the podium, and I send it to the president and say, what's wrong with this picture? Well, what's wrong with this picture? There are no women. And usually this is a very diverse group of men, but even this isn't correct because this isn't what it looks like. It's usually a group of white men. So, what do we know about gender bias? A bias in general, these unconscious biases, they're pervasive. They're everywhere. You're constantly guided by them, and you don't even know it. Me, you, every one of us. They predict your behavior. So the problem is, if you don't know you have it, if you don't know you're biased against women being scientists or physicians, if you don't know that you're biased against African Americans and Latinos being physicians and scientists, then you can't do anything about it. If you know that you're biased, at least you can ask yourself the question, am I making this decision on this leadership position for this white male really because he's the best, code word, sorry gentlemen, for white male, or are the women or the minorities on this list as qualified? So at least you can ask yourself the question. And I know you're going to do some unconscious bias training. Everybody go to it. Everybody go to it, because it just tells you something about yourself, and you don't have to tell anybody else how you scored. But I think it's useful to, the more you know about yourself, the more you can behave in a different way. And it differs between all of us. We all have different biases. It's seen everywhere. You have probably seen the data. It's seen in evaluation of qualifications, in letters of recommendations. There have been numerous studies. There was one last year, PNAS, John and Jane, similar resumes, applying for a position as a research tech in a lab. This wasn't even for a higher faculty position. And it was John and Jane. Jane always, they would hire John over Jane by a great majority. In addition, if they did hire Jane, they offered her $4,000 less than John for the same job. The resumes were exactly the same. They only changed the name. And they had men and women that were looking at these and making these decisions who they would hire. This was a study. And how many know what così fan tutti means? They all do it. You know the opera, the Mozart opera, it's così fan tutti. They all do it. Men and women, both, favored John over Jane. So, gentlemen and ladies, my female colleagues here, it's not all those big bad guys out there doing this. We too are doing this. So, take the tests. Orchestral auditions. I have to tell you this. I'm sure some of you know about this. How many of you do know the Malcolm Gladwell book, Tipping Point? In Tipping Point, do you remember the story about the orchestra, the horn player? It was a woman, and she was auditioning for a horn first chair position in a very distinguished symphony. And symphony orchestra, and she played it, and she missed a note. She thought, oh, I'm never going to get this. Well, at the end of the audition, they called her number, and she comes out because she had auditioned behind a screen. And actually, they made people start taking their shoes off, because even behind a screen, you could tell it was a woman walking out on the stage. And she walks out, and the judges gasped out loud. Why? Because they couldn't believe this woman could play this horn solo, this most difficult horn solo. They didn't believe that she did, and they didn't seat her. They didn't give her the job. She took them to court. It took years, but she stuck with it. She finally got seated. But that's how pervasive and deep. I mean, this was perfectly behind a screen, didn't know who she was. So take the test. It's the Harvard Implicit Association test. Go online. It's simple. And like I said, you don't have to tell anybody. Or you can tell, you can do what you want with the information. But it's for you. It's for you. So the other issue in kind of institutional issues that we have, cultural stereotypes are stacked against women. And we all know this. Men are assertive, strong, great ideas. Women are nice, we're friendly, socially skilled, egalitarian, but if we behave like a man, if we are seen as assertive, as we are seen as strong, we're called a not very nice name that I won't mention, but we all know what it is. And this continues to happen. And so women are always faced with this issue of, am I going to be communal? And I had some conversations this morning with women about this. Or agentic. In other words, am I going to be assertive and speak up? Or am I going to sit back? Because we have a very narrow path in terms of behaviors that are acceptable. Men don't, but women do. And it's an issue, and it's when you're in a meeting, and I've seen this over and over. I will say, a search committee meeting, they called two of the candidates names that were certainly demeaning to the women, and you've got to, you have to. I said, wait a minute here. I didn't hear that apply to any of these men. that we're talking about who you said the same things about. So you just have to be aware of these things. So here's the women can't win with men or women, because women too view women in the same way if they behave in an assertive manner. So these impact your leadership searches. So this is where you can start to make some differences. First thing is I call it the 30% rule. All search committees should have a minimum of 30% women and minorities on them, minimum. Why? Because that's the number, the percentage, it's not a number, that changes the conversation. If you're the only voice in the room, if you're the only woman, you tend to get dismissed, or the only minority, you're dismissed as the token. Oh, we have to have them here. Two also don't make a difference, but it's depending on the percentage. So it's 30 to 40%. Really begins to change the conversation, and then you're not viewed as an individual, you fill in the blank, because there's more than one of you. And you may have different opinions, and so you begin to lose that token, that tokenism sense to these individuals. Educate your committees. You're going to start doing that. You're going to be doing unconscious bias training. That's one of the first things we all should do. The second thing is behavioral interviewing. Do some behavioral interviewing. Learn how to do it. Train some people how to do it. And then train the trainers to teach other people in the institution. And that, you know, we all get the CVs, and I don't know about you, and I sit on all our leadership search committees, but they defeat me, you know, because they're pages and pages. We're looking at leaders. These are people with 20, 30 years experience, right? And you're looking at this and you're like, whoa. We always ask for a 2-page summary of your accomplishments. I want to tell all of you, if you're looking at a leadership position, I don't care if they ask for it or not. You be the candidate that does that and puts it on the front of your CV. You be the one who knows that this is going to set you apart. And you learn how to write those and write those well. But do some unconscious, or do some training, because what we get is the search committee sits there and they look at this and say, well, tell us something. They ask something around the CV, and I'm like, no, we know the CV. It's not about the CV. One of the things you never do in interviewing, you never use the word would. What would you do if you got this position? What you ask, what did you do? What did you do to resolve a conflict? Give us a situation. Why? Not would. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Means nothing. They could say anything and you'd have no idea. What they will do, past behavior predicts future behavior. That's always the thought when you're doing interviewing. So try and find out what they did do, not what they would do. Bring women candidates to the table. I never go to a search committee meeting, or first committee, without a list of candidates already prepared. Ask your colleagues to help identify if you don't know the field well. Develop this list of candidates. And I say recruit everywhere all the time. I'm always looking for talented women who might want to be leaders, and I might be able to recruit to MD Anderson at national meetings, always. So recruit everywhere all the time. So what I can tell you is we've done the 30% for sure. In fact, we've changed our policy to be even more rigorous than that. But the outcome for us has been, this office opened in 2007. It was a new office. And in the past 6 years, we have more than doubled. We've gone from more than doubled our women leaders in the past 7 years. We've gone from 15% to almost 30% of our leaders are now women. Unfortunately, they're not at the top. We're not at the top yet. That still is an issue, even though we have greatly increased our department chairs. So what can you do? It's really hard to recruit women. I was just saying earlier today, so I call potential candidates, men and women. I call the men. I've only had one say, I have to check with my wife. She was a scientist and she had a tenured position at an Ivy. I have to check with her, and our son is in high school and it's a difficult time. So my family is important here. I need to check with my family. One man out of 7 years, and I do about 10 searches a year. You do the numbers. I've talked to lots of people. I call the women. I've only had one woman who said, oh yes, I'll come and look. Every other woman I've talked to was, I have to check with my husband, I have to check with my kids, it's not a good time, I don't know if I'm ready. I get a litany of reasons. So it's really hard to move women. It's very hard to move them from one place to another. So how do you do this? So groom your own. These are 3 women that we sent to ELAM in the past 5 years. 2 of them, Sharon Dent and Val Lewis, or Karen Liu, are department chairs. One's basic science, one is clinical. Val Lewis is a section chief. She is a very cat. Val is a very interesting woman. She is a surgical oncologist, orthopedic surgical oncologist. That's a mouthful, and there aren't many of them. These 2 women were sponsored, and I'm going to talk about sponsorship. Shelley Barton is Dean of the GSBS, and Kim Ando is the Chair of Biostats. And then finally, we groomed 3 of them. Funda Merrick, Sharon Giordano, and Diane Bedurka have been groomed for positions. Not that they got the position because we groomed them to compete for the position. So this year this is just some of them, but this year out of 10 leaders, we appointed 10 new leaders, 10 this year, 6 were women. And so we are very pleased with that. The majority were internal. So we have one of the problems is few executive role models. Now this is going to, so you know, I struggle with this whole issue. We had a lot of discussion, and it always comes up around family life. Never call it balance. You don't balance anything. You just keep the balls in the air and hope they don't hit the ground. And when one does, you pick it up and you say, mea culpa, and you go on. You know, it's that simple. But there are few executive role models. So this is a problem of not having women in leadership. Half of women with salaries over greater than 100K have no children. This is from the corporate world. A third of women who began their research careers without children, only a third, become mothers. Tenured women are twice as likely as tenured men to be single. Why don't women want to do this? Really? I mean, it doesn't take, you know, rocket science here. We need more women who have done this. So but I will posit to you that this is totally doable. Who is this? Marie Curie. 2 Nobels, 2 different fields, right? 2 daughters, one of whom also is got a Nobel Prize. Okay? That was then, over 100 years ago. How about now? Carol Greider. 2 kids, single mother. When they called her and said she got the Nobel Prize in 2009, she and Liz Blackburn and another colleague who was a male, whose name I should remember, and I don't, I'm sorry, showing my bias, unfortunately. I admit to it. She was taking laundry out of the dryer and folding it, and they called her and told her she got a Nobel Prize. It's a really very funny story. So it is doable. Easy? No. Doable? Yes, it is. In our own situation, this is a picture. We published a book called Legends and Legacies, and with their personal stories of 26 women, a lot of whom were women leaders. So there are 26 women up here, and out of that 26 women, 95% of them have children. 95%, so that's around 20 of them. Some of them, and some of them had their children when they were postdocs, and this was like Margaret Kripke, who's now retired, had her daughter as a postdoc, and yet was our chief academic officer, the first and only woman in a senior executive position at MD Anderson, the chair of immunology department, our first female chair of a basic science department. And then there are people like me. I had my son as a tenured professor, and we made different choices. She made a choice to have it early, have her kids early. I made a choice that I was too busy working in the lab, writing grants, writing papers, having fun, living around the world, traveling. I didn't want kids, I didn't want anything. Finally, I woke up and said, maybe this is not enough. Maybe I'm going to have a child, and had one, fortunately. So there are ways to do this. And I'll just give you a couple of practical tips, because I think that's what's helpful. Number one, and I was a single mother. Number one, live close to where you work, because that way you can go to see. If I had to buy a much smaller house so I could live like right down the street almost from the office, from MD Anderson, but yet I got to go to the school things in the morning. I was in a little late, or I'd get out at lunchtime to go something if it was there. So you have to do everything, both men and women, because men are facing this too now, to make your life easy. Buy all the help you can get. I had to live in for a while. I always had a housekeeper at home. I was a professor, so I had a little more flexibility financially as well as time. But the point is, did I want to wash dishes and cook dinner? I love to cook. No, I wanted to spend time with my son when I got home, somebody else, or else I picked dinner up on the way home. Positive outcome, I have a son who's a great cook, who's now married, and his wife can't cook at all. She is really lucky, because he would call me and he'd say, Mom, are you on your way home yet? And I'd say, yeah. And he'd say, no, you're not. I know you're not even out the door. He said, you haven't shut down your computer. What are we doing for dinner? And I'd say, don't worry about it. I'll deal with it. I'll pick it up. Well, when he got old enough, he said, don't worry about it, Mom. I'll take care of it. And I'd get home, and he would be, and we'd cook together. But he'd have gone to the grocery store, a little grocery store up the street, and he'd go up there. He could sign the tab, and then he'd come home, and so it's doable, but it's not easy, and it's all about choices that we all make. So let me go back to this one, because one comment I want to make here. Now that I'm going to turn to, what are women doing? What are we doing that's not helping us? For those of you who are young in the audience and may not have your children or may not have decided, there is a statement in Sheryl Sandberg's book, Don't Leave Before You Leave. Women, and there's hard data on this, women make decisions on their careers because they might have children. As graduate students, as residents, as medical students, they might want to be a surgeon. They love surgery. But they think, oh no, surgery, children, doesn't fit very well. So they're making decisions when they're 20 about something that's easily 10 years off. Or maybe not so much. But the point is, they start making these decisions very early on that keep them from going into something they love, something they have a passion for. There's nothing wrong with that. Just know that that's what you're doing. Know that you're making a decision, and you have no clue whether you're going to have children. I thought I'd never have children. I never even thought of it. And woke up one day and said, uh-oh, maybe I better think about this, because what I'm doing is just not enough. But don't leave before you leave. What else do we do? Just say yes. I talked about this earlier. The women that I call, am I ready? I don't think we just had an example of that in a recent search. A woman who is in the institution, she was a new recruiter in the department. Department chair left, he had recruited her, and we were wondering why she said she was going to send her CV for the search committee, it's for a chair position. We never got it. We were wondering, oh well, she's just ambivalent. No, she wasn't ambivalent. She had to check with the former chair, she had to check with this one, she had to check with that one for them to tell her, yes, you should apply for this, yes, you're ready for this position. What it ended up, this happened just yesterday. We had a meeting of the whole search committee to discuss the candidates. One of the guys said, well, she seemed ambivalent. She didn't send her CV for a long time, and there were two women on the committee. I said, Steve, I want to tell you, this happens all the time with women. They need to have external validation. And so another woman said, yes, she in fact had told her that. So don't do that. So say yes, but know when to say no. I love this. Don't pick up the mop. If it's something we all do, we're all good citizens, and we have to be good citizens, and we all do some of this. But sometimes you say, maybe I don't need to be in charge of the holiday party or the whatever you're asked to be in charge of. So be mindful about what you say yes to and what you don't say yes to, as well as what you don't say no to, okay? Underestimate our achievements all the time. Underestimate them all the time. It's just like on the search committees. Is there a man that tells me he thinks he's not qualified for a position? No. Are there women? Yes. You know, despite the fact that they have a litany, you know, they have a long history of leadership positions, they still think, don't underestimate your achievements. The other thing we do, the I word, we're not very good at that, and we're always really good at, you know, I got help from others, I'm lucky. Do not use the word lucky. You might be in the right place at the right time, but make no mistake, your name is not in front of the search committee because we like you. We're there because we're calling you because we think you have the goods. We think you have the right stuff and you can do this job, and we'd like to talk to you and see if that's correct. So when credit is due to others, give it. When it's not, just say thank you. My president brought that home to me not long ago. We nominate all of our faculty for awards, and we had a really terrific year last year in getting a lot of awards for faculty, and he was talking about that. He said, you know, our thanks to Liz, et cetera, and I, of course, what did I say? What do you think I said? Thank you, that's exactly what I said. I said, oh, but you know, my team, and Ron looked at me and he said, Liz, we know that. The point is you're the leader of that team, and without you leading it, it wouldn't be happening. And I said, thank you. So just say thank you, and you can also add, I really appreciate it, but stop. Stop, just stop, and don't say anything else. Set big, hairy, audacious goal. Men are very ambitious. They have big goals. There's nothing wrong with big goals. I think we tend not to do that. We think a little smaller than that. We think it's a meritocracy. You come in, you work hard, put your head down, somebody's going to notice you. I see a lot of no heads. The women are saying no, it's not a meritocracy. It really isn't. You have to do that, and it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So we value credentials. Men value personal connections. We think that's kind of dirty. Why? I don't want to get something because of my personal connections. You're never getting it simply because mostly people don't get it because of personal connections. But if you have the goods and you have the personal connections, it certainly helps. So having said that, what do you need to do? You need to build what we call social capital. You need to get out there. You need to be seen. You need to trade favors. You need to call your male colleagues. Have lunch with them. If they ask you out, there was one time a bunch of the finance guys said they were going out. Liz, you want to go with us? I almost said no. And I said, sure, I'd love to do that. But my first inclination, even me, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I went out and had dinner with them. We ate sushi. So you have to do these. You have to build these kind of social connections, not only with women, but with men. But you need them all, and they are critical. In fact, some people think they're even more, they're equally as important as your credentials that you bring to the table. Whether that's true and whether we like that is beside the point. Facts are the facts. So I'd like to finish up talking about sponsorship, how it differs from mentorship and why it's critical. And there was a New York Times article last year, here's the date up here, whenever it was, February, I guess. Anyway, last February, Nicholas Kristof was at Davos in Switzerland, the economic conference, and Sheryl Sandberg was there. And they were bemoaning the fact that there weren't very many women in leadership positions, and they were talking about it, and he wrote a column about this, and I responded with this. This is just one of the last sentence in the column. It was published in the opinion pages of the New York Times. It was really kind of interesting because I just sat down and wrote it, and then got it down to, it took me about a couple hours to get this out the door. Usually, it was just one of those things that resonated with me. And I say, although the data are sparse and the jury is still out, sponsorship may be one approach to the problem, women in leadership. What do we have to lose? Not much else seems to be working. And I think this is a real opportunity. From the business world, it is well known that you need to have sponsors. To quote from a woman who's general manager of IBM. Famous women, who were their sponsors? Okay, tell me, Sarah Palin's, who was her sponsor? Say it. McCain, exactly. Elena Kagan. Barack Obama, yes. She was a professor when he was a professor at the University of Chicago. He knew her from there. He thought she'd make a great justice proposed her, and she was confirmed. Sheryl Sandberg, I really hate to put this guy up. It really pains me. But who was it? Larry Summers. I know he doesn't think we can do medicine and science. What can I tell you? We have no brains for it. But anyway, he did sponsor her, and she gives him great credit all the time. So what is it? What is sponsorship? It's public support by someone, by your dean, a chancellor, a provost, by someone who is in a position of authority and power and has that power, can use it to influence. They use their influence. It's predicated, they have to have power, and it's focused on your advancement. That's what a sponsor is. Does it impact careers? Again, from the business world, and here are the data. Yes, it does. And this is from the proteges, if you will. There's a 20% increase in satisfaction with pay, with what they're doing. Sponsorship works. So the overall benefit is 20 to 30%. It sounds small, but if you're that individual, it's big. So, do you or have you had a sponsor? Does anybody think they've had a sponsor? I see heads. How many hands? Show hands. Okay. A few people have had a sponsor. Who? Or what? No. Oh, your dean. Okay. There was another hand here. Yes?
Mine was the director of health education in San Diego, where I first started health education.
Terrific. So, and I think it's important because a lot of people don't know the whole concept is kind of murky. So if you don't know what it looks like, you don't know what it is, you don't know, number one, you won't know how to find it, you won't know how to ask for it if you want to do that, and you won't know that it's been working, yet it works for you. So you have to have some understanding. So, here are the important things about sponsors. They advocate for your next promotion. They go out, stick their neck out publicly. It's someone in a position of power who's sticking their neck out for someone who nobody may really know very well. That's a sponsor. They expand your career vision. Particularly for women, this is important. They pump up their ambition. They say, yes, you can do this. Go out there and do it. They teach you how to negotiate your first salary to make sure that you get, when you get that position, that you get the money to make sure you're successful. Because if you don't have the resources, you're not going to be successful. And we're not very good at negotiating. They provide opportunities for something I'll talk about shortly, that the hot jobs. The two most important things are that they advocate for your next promotion. They go out on a limb publicly on your behalf. They stick their neck out. That's important. I mean, that's taking a real risk. I like this because they also advise you on executive presence, what to wear. And I like this cartoon. It says, maybe it's something, she's getting lipstick, maybe something a bit more commander-in-chief. And a sponsor does help women with the issue of executive presence. I can remember as, when I was just starting in science, I was one of the few women in science. There weren't very many. And I always insisted, and I, to this day, almost always wear suits. Because why? That gives you kind of, it made me feel more secure, but also it also communicates something out to the audience. When I gave talks, actually I wear a suit almost every day, all the time. That's the way it's always been. When I ran my lab, I wore a suit. I took the jacket off, put a lab coat on. But I was always, wanted to have that kind of a presence that looked like you were serious. And I kind of thought that meant wear a suit. And I obviously still do. So men are more likely to have sponsors than women. Why is that? Absolutely. It's basically it. There are more men in the leadership position, so they will sponsor men because we just think of people who look like us. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not malevolent, it's not malicious, it's just the way it is. And that's why unconscious bias training helps. Because you understand that you do that, and you think, now wait a minute, isn't Dr. Smith over here just as good, and maybe we should look at her too. It doesn't mean you shouldn't look at the man, but you should also consider the women. Okay, what about mentoring? Why? How's sponsorship different? Why not just mentoring? Necessary, but not sufficient. And here are some data. You can read this, but basically what it amounts to is mentoring benefits both men and women, but men got more benefit than women. And more of those men who were mentored tended to be mentored into leadership positions. Why? Because their mentors were sponsors. They were CEOs. They were high-powered executives. So it's necessary, but it's not enough. How does it? There's a lot of overlaps between, there are some overlaps. You can read these two. The biggest difference to me is that a sponsor sticks their neck out, is public. A mentor can be behind the scenes. Nobody may know who your mentor is, and that's okay. That's not what they're there for. A sponsor also has to be in a high position, a dean, a provost, a CEO. Mentor can be at any rank. You can have an assistant professor as a mentor. You can have a full professor. You can have a vice president as your mentor. So sponsors have to have influence. Sponsors expect you to be loyal and to be a high performer. Mentors, they expect little in return from you. They expect you to maybe follow their advice. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But sponsorship is really a two-way street. And I like this quote. Coach tells you what to do. A mentor listens to you and will speak with you, but a sponsor talks about you. It's the only time it's a good thing to have somebody talking about you, if it's somebody who's sponsoring you in a conversation about a leadership position. So why do we need them? I think that we have pretty much covered all this earlier, but just to remind you why. Increases your self-confidence, helps you value your achievements and sees what they're worth, helps you find the hot jobs. Those are the jobs and the mission-critical jobs in an organization that usually lead. They're kind of a tryout. They're the audition for the big one. It's an audition for a bigger job. Sponsors encourage you to go for these stretch assignments. It's like, so when I was very young, and I had a master's degree, no PhD, working in a lab in the summer when I was teaching school for a year. But I didn't want to lose my touch at the lab. I loved being in a lab. Halfway through the summer, and I started teaching residents. They offered me the position full-time, faculty member, low-level instructor, et cetera, and I could go to graduate school. And I said, oh, I can't do this. I'm not qualified, you name it, all the things I just talked about. Well, when you think about that, you think, the people who were trying to hire me, the residents that I was teaching, all thought I was qualified, and I'm saying, I don't think I'm qualified. It's a lack of confidence. I turned down the job. I went home and I said, uh-oh, big mistake. So I went back in the next day and I said, please can I have that job if you haven't given it to somebody else? And I took it, and that was really the beginning of where I ended up now. So we do this. They're earned. This is not you're a nice person. This is not an entitlement. Getting sponsored and being a protege is not an entitlement. You have to be a respected colleague. You have to have developed that. You have to look for opportunities for visibility. You have to suggest improvements. They are looking for people who can communicate effectively. You have to be a very high performer. That's what gets somebody to look at you and be your sponsor. And the question is, do you find them or do they find you? And again, it comes back to this whole social networking thing, this building this social capital. It's not only who you know, who knows you through that hard work, through being a respected colleague, through being on important committees, through being the chair and know how to run a meeting and show leadership. That's how you find sponsors. I'm going to skip this because I want to finish with a couple slides here. What does a protege do? Protege, this is a two-way bridge here. What do they do? Well, trust, they demonstrate trust. They have to be loyal. They have to perform 110%. They have to promote the sponsor's legacy. The two most important, I think, are loyalty and contributing 110%. Okay, so let's examine this sponsor-protege relationship. This was a failed one, not because they didn't win the election. It was failed because Katie Couric interviewed. Did Palin know her stuff? Exactly. She had no clue. So number one, she didn't have the knowledge. She didn't contribute 110%. And what was she doing after she got over her kind of, being from Alaska? Who was she promoting? Herself. She was promoting herself. And in fact, the election night when he lost the election, she wanted to go out, give her own speech, and it's like, excuse me, you aren't the presidential candidate here. So this was failed because she didn't support him. She didn't. A protege do everything to look, and your power to make your sponsor look smart for backing you, you're wasting their time. So perfect, and you think of a failed relationship, this one is it. This is just a summary. We've been through all this, but to compare sponsor and protege back and forth, I don't think I need to read these to you. There are a number of you in this audience I know who are senior enough and have enough power to be sponsors. I encourage both the men in the audience and the women in the audience who have these kinds of positions to sponsor both men, women, and this is another opportunity for getting underrepresented minorities recognized as well. This applies to them as well. Look broadly, look deeply, look often, look for someone who doesn't look like you. Male or female? Don't be gender biased here, ladies. Men can do it as well. Men, there are more of them. Reach out to them. Tell them you're interested. Look for men who have wives, daughters, who are professionals. They're a little more open to this because, things happen to their wives and their daughters in their professions, and so they get it. So I want to go to an example of one individual who has been a sponsor, and that's Harold Shapiro, who was the president. The question is, can we do this in academia? Well, we can. He was president of Princeton. He sponsored here 5 women, one of whom some of them are in the Ivies. Shirley Tillman, now the past president of Princeton, you can read those names. He got it. He got it, that these were talented women, that he knew they could do the job, and he sponsored them for those positions. And so I would encourage everyone in this audience who has that kind of power to look around. You are a young medical school. You are malleable, as was said this morning. When these positions come open for leadership, think about this and start looking around now for who might be a potential candidate for a department chair or even higher position. So I thank you all for your attention. We're right spot on time. It's a pleasure to be here again and to see a lot of you again and to have the day spent with you. So thank you very much.
Maybe 2 or 3